Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. What's up, everybody? Welcome to PLD Views, episode number 2 on the PLD Projects YouTube channel. I am your host. I am PLD. Welcome to my little slice of the YouTube universe. And this show you're watching deals with my favorite science fiction small screen franchise of all time, V. God, I love this show when I was younger. I was into Star Wars first, of course, but I couldn't go to the movies. I wanted to find something on TV. This was what I gravitated towards. It's an original 1983 TV miniseries written and directed by Kenneth Johnson, and it is a doozy. But what we do on this show? Well, I'm going to give you some news bits when it comes up. I'm going to give you, which I would know my breath because this news that's happening about V is very slow drips. Comes in very, very slow drips. The last bit of news was August of 2019. But if there's new news of any attempts to bring it back, I will, of course, let you know. But also, what else am I going to do? I'm going to walk us through the media, just like I'm doing with PLD 1138. I am going to go through the original pieces of media from the V 1983 to the sequel miniseries to the weekly series to the comics to the books to the reboot attempts to the reboot that was successful and all that. We're going to go through it. I'll give you notes on it, first views on it. Not very spoilery, but enough for me to get involved in it. Maybe you'll go check it out. Maybe if you do know it, you'll have some fond memories. What do you want to? What can I say? Ready? But let's get right into it. We're going to do this first episode. Deals with the original miniseries, the first episode that was created. Now, Ken Johnson originally wanted to do this as an update of sorts, inspired by a book called "It Can't Happen Here" by Sinclair Lewis. There was a story about fascism arising in the U.S. So they wanted to make a very broad based allegory of World War II, and it was very successful in that fashion. I mean, it wasn't very subtle, but it was well written. He couldn't find any buyers at first. That was his initial story pitch, but because I was a target demo, it seems sci-fi was getting big. So once he changed the idea of fascism rising within the United States from different country or from within, he flipped a little bit and changed it to an alien invasion, a subtle alien invasion, not like War of the Worlds, more subversion. Also, NBC got interested in it, and that was great. So the Nazi Germans were recast as aliens from outer space. The scientific community replaced the Jewish community. There's the sort of the Hitler Youth, there's the Visitor Youth, and the Visitor Friends. A lot of broad-based allegories, and I mean broad-based. I mean hammer over the nail subtlety. Look at the symbol that was on the visitors' ships. Do I have to say anything more? But either way, what happened is got the story written, and it was a very imaginative tale. Some might find it a little bit of a slow burn if you're expecting a big gunfight, big alien invasion movie that you see on Independence Day, or if you see on a lot of other Star Wars, like a lot of action. You might be disappointed. This is not an action piece yet. Does it develop into that eventually? Yeah, but for especially the first part of the miniseries here, the part one, which is a 2 hour miniseries. I'm sorry, 4 hour miniseries, 2 hours per episode, and the first one is definitely a slow burn. It introduces a sprawling cast of characters. There is a ton of characters. Almost reminds me of the show Heroes, if you remember that. But Heroes had 20 episodes to really get into everybody. V had 4 hours and to do the story and get the characters involved. And these characters were very well defined. They had a lot of connections, so you introduce them separately, and you find everybody kind of came together organically to form either. There's really five types of people in this scenario. You got the aliens, you got the resistance, you have the fifth column, which is basically the aliens that eventually try helping the humans, and you have the collaborators who are the humans that are trying to help the aliens. And there's the miscellaneous people who just want to live about their daily lives. So I gotta call it in the minor characters, but it is a great cast. It's headed up by Mark Singer, better known as the Beastmaster. This is probably his other most famous role. He plays Mike Donovan, a TV cameraman who ends up finding a little more than finding out that the visitors are here more for more reasons than they initially proclaim. He ends up being definitely a key cog in the resistance, even though he's not really much of a joiner, as he will say. I found him to be a kind of mishmash of Captain America and Han Solo. He's very much a do-gooder. In fact, that's one of his nicknames, Gutter. He does wants to do the right thing. He's very righteous, but at the same time, he's a little bit of a maverick. He's a little bit of a he's going to go off his own. He's not going to trust too many people. He wants to get things done the right way. So he's a great character. One of my favorite characters when I was growing up. To be honest, I used to play him all the time. In fact, my friends and I were so dumb that we would both want to be Donovan. So one of us would be Mike and the other would be Donovan. I don't know how it worked, but we made it work. We were kids. But also in there, Julie Parrish, led by Faye Grant. She is a young, spunky doctor who, because of the scientific community, as I said, and as I'll get into, scientific community becoming ostracized, she becomes very wary of the visitors too, and really becomes the leader of the resistance. She's a very strong female character in a time where female characters were just starting to become strong. You're starting to get the Ripleys, you're starting to get the Sarah Connors. Julie Parrish is a very strong female character just in those realms. A young, spunky, smart, intelligent kid who ends up being one of the most potent leaders of the human resistance. Also, another key point, Diana, played by Jane Bather, the eventual leader of the aliens. I mean, she's starts off in this episode really as a scientific officer. So she has broad base. She's not quite in the military hierarchy, so to speak. But really, she's the smartest person in the room, as Action Movie Anatomy would say, smartest person in the room. And she eventually takes over the whole shebang as time goes on. She's very intelligent, very statistic, but plays off very well too. And finally, another one I'll highlight out of the key people, Robert Englund. Yes, that's Robert Englund, the man who plays Freddy Krueger. And this role couldn't be anything further from Freddy Krueger. He plays an alien who was originally supposed to work in Saudi Arabia when he comes down. Somehow bureaucracy happens, gets in space just like on Earth, and he gets set up in LA. So he stumbles about with the language, doesn't really know what he's talking about, but he ends up being a nice alien. He's one of the aliens that you discover doesn't really know what the aliens are here for, doesn't really know the true purpose behind the alien invasion. So he ends up siding with the humans. And it's a really touching tale, that is, to be honest with you. We'll get to that, though. Gist of the episode is, like I said at the beginning, is the first part is where were you when the aliens arrived, right? His big cold opening with Donovan and his camera and his engineer in El Salvador, covering the guerrilla warfare down there. And that's this whole big segment where Donovan's trying to escape a helicopter that's shooting at him. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, this alien ship comes over the horizon and it stops everything. There's an ominous music being played by Joe Harnell. Joe Harnell does the score. It's a wonderful score, very ominous, for TV. It's really great. Let's get that up there. Let me get on the screen. There's the first shot. First shot is Donovan seeing the overview, and that's when the credits hit. Then we come back to everybody. We start getting introduced to everybody else. Julie Parrish is introduced. The Taylor brothers are introduced here and there, but separately. You don't even know they're brothers at the time. It's later on. They do that a lot. They introduce these characters, and then there's another character, and then later on you see them together. Oh, they're a family. Oh, they're neighbors. Oh, they actually interact with each other. And it's a great little community of people. Kenneth Johnson has some great shots. This is one of my favorite shots. It just tells so much in one little frame. Another frame I have to show you. Robert Maxwell is an anthropologist. He's doing a dig, digging up some old bones when the aliens arrive, and there's this great shot of what he's trying to do. And then the alien comes in. That's so ominous, isn't it? I love this shot. It's such a great piece. But they come, and at first everybody's scared, as they will be, but the visitors make contact, and they say they come in peace. They say that their world is dying, and they need chemicals that they can only make on some of Earth's minerals that they can help save their planet. And in return, they're going to give us all the fruits of their knowledge. Obviously, they're an alien race that has been able to traverse through space. So obviously, they are well advanced in medical terms, scientific terms, everything else. So that's the idea. but it always seems a little bit off. There's little bits and pieces. People start getting a little bit suspicious about things that are going on. Out of frame there, out of focus there for a second. Sorry. Um, People start getting a little nervous about what's going on. They start wondering, well, why are they here? If they, what do they need from us if they're so advanced? Things start happening where the scientific seminars get postponed for various reasons. People start disappearing. And then there becomes a announcement that there's a conspiracy in the scientific world. This is what the visitors start searching with the Jewish population in Germany. They want scientific. They start naming scientists as traitors. They want to brand them. They want to make sure they want to put them on some kind of list so that they know where they are, because the scientific community is taking over, trying to take over alien motherships. Is it really? We don't know. That's what the public. That's what they're telling the public. Um, this was the big reveal then, when Mike Donovan finally gets fed up with what's coming. He gets fed up with what's being fed to him. He goes and tries to sneak aboard the mothership, and he discovers that they're far more than what they say. They're actually a lizard race behind the skins, despite them looking just like us. Underneath there is green lizards. They have tongues, they have eyes just like lizards' eyes, and they're not really our friends at all. But it doesn't take long for him to get tracked down. He tries to get this tape on air, and no go. They start chasing him down. He's the first cog in the resistance. But in the meantime, Julie Parrish has also started resistance because she's part of the scientific community. So it's a slow build as they try to find each other, who they can trust, who they can't trust, and it ends up being at the end of the day. There's some very touching moments. One of the very most touching moments is this one. The Bernstein is one of my favorite moments. The Bernstein family, Abraham, is a survivor of the concentration camps. His son Stanley he lives with. The Maxwells, the people I talked about before, who were the anthropologists, they look for a place to hide after they can't make it out of the city. They try to make it out of the city. There's checkpoints. Comes back. They try to hide with the Bernsteins. Stanley is hesitant to do anything. He doesn't want the danger. Not in my backyard kind of situation. They're not coming for me. I'm not a scientist. Like I said, it's not very subtle, but it's very touching. Abraham gives him a speech telling him about the concentration camps, telling him a truth that he had let his son believe all these years ago, that his mother had died before she made the concentration camps. He reveals that she didn't, and that they smuggled him out in a suitcase, and that if they had perhaps found a place to hide back in the day, perhaps his mother would still be alive. It's a very touching moment between father and son, and Stanley agrees to help the Maxwells out. It's a very great scene. There's a lot of great human moments in this show, which is what it makes it work. It's not just the alien invasion, not just the cool pew pew of the lasers, the faces getting ripped off, that aliens underneath. That's all cool, but it's the humanistic side that really gives it its depth. Um, at the very end, another piece with Abraham is he sees some kids, graffitiing them, but he decides that obviously even the kids don't like the aliens. So he tries to teach them something that is a way to rebel, a way of a symbol. And they start to see spray paints the V, just like in World War II, it was a symbol for them. Then it was a way that they could all show their sign of resistance as best they can. That's how the first episode ends. It's a very low key episode as far as that goes. You're left with, the resistance is starting. The resistance actually does form a little bit. There's a raid on some medical supplies, and we lose one resistance member, so things get real. But it also sparks people coming together more. But like I said, there's also Willie, who gets introduced to some people, and he doesn't realize anything quite yet, but he's being friendly actually just to help the humans. And you don't know who's on what side at this point, but it's a very ominous feeling, very dark feeling, but it's just beginning at that point. And there's the gif of Donovan. It's a pretty bad gif. This is 1983, folks, on NBC, so that's the special effect. I actually wish I had the other gif of following it, because it does follow up with a very nice gif of the guinea pig going down Diana's throat as Donovan catches this on camera. So that is the end of the first episode of the original miniseries. So we can get into the next segment of our show, which is today I'm going to be talking about the timelines of the show. because, like I said, there's so many properties involved. Continuity is a big thing. But as you might know, if you're a Star Wars fan, continuity wasn't as big of a thing in the 80s. People took stories, they wrote them, they didn't really care if it matched up. You took things as they were. So you try to go back and read this in any kind of order, it's tough to do so. So I will tell you that there are, when I was younger, or when I tried to do my website, I think I mentioned this in the first episode, I had a website with a database on V, all sorts of information. I might bring it back. I actually had some people still inquire about it to this day. Um, Maybe I should bring it back. It's definitely a niche product, obviously. Hopefully you're enjoying this. But I have three, I broke it down to three main timelines. On the website, I had like five or six. I realized it was just too much because it was just, I was creating new timelines for like one little sliver and it wasn't really worth it. So, but the three main timelines, but the third timeline does have some subsections to it. But let's get the first three out of the first two out of the way because the first two are very simple. One I just called the reboot timeline. The 2009 ABC weekly series, or television series rather, was very different off from, it didn't have anything to do with the original storyline. It just had the same name, the same initial concept of aliens coming down to Earth as friends with ulterior motives and resistance forming. Everything beyond that, completely separate. So that timeline is very easy. The ABC first season, the ABC second series, second season, and that's it. The second timeline that we should mention is probably the most interesting to me. If you've been watching this, you don't know much about V. I call it the Kenneth Johnson timeline. Well, Kenneth Johnson's the writer creator. Shouldn't that be the main timeline? Well, if you missed last episode, a quick overview. Kenneth Johnson wrote and directed the original miniseries. He was approached and he started work on what became the sequel miniseries called V: The Final Battle. Now, during that time, during the process, he left the project over creative differences, and he actually has famously said he never watched one bit of it except for once by accident, and he said that they were making all the wrong choices. But after the final battle is over, Brandon Tarkatoff, the NBC president at the time, tried to move him back for the weekly series, but Kenneth Johnson was interested, but he didn't want to do it as a weekly series. He wanted to do it as maybe 3 or 4 2-hour movies a year, make it event television, just like the original miniseries was. It's a tactic that he actually used to success later on with his Alien Nation movie turned into series. And these little bits and pieces of movies, and it might have been an interesting take on things a little bit earlier. But NBC wanted the weekly series. So again, Ken Johnson walked away. The weekly series devolved, and we'll talk about a lot about that. It was a kind of a tough moment for the series. Didn't really know where it wanted to go. So the ratings started tanking. It was the most expensive weekly television produced at the time. About halfway through, they approached Kenneth Johnson again to try to come save it. And Kenneth Johnson at that point said too much water under the bridge. But since then, after the series ended, after everything else ended, a couple of attempts to reboot it, Kenneth Johnson himself has come back to try to reboot it. Initially, he wanted to do a sequel to his original miniseries, which would retcon everything else. He called it V: The Second Generation. And that is what he tried to get done, but people didn't seem to be too interested. So, in an attempt to kind of gain some kind of prestige or get some ball rolling on it, he decided to write it as a novel. So, he actually wrote V: The Second Generation as a novel, and that did spark some interest. But a lot of the networks and film companies, as he was testing out both waters, have said they wanted to remake the original miniseries first, and remake the original, and then they will do the second generation. And that's what he's still been working on for a long time. He has made some progress on it. But as far as the timeline goes, that makes it very simple. V: The original miniseries, V: The original miniseries novelization with the update. What I mean by that is A.C. Crispin wrote a novelization that included both V and V: The Final Battle as one big tune. Kenneth Johnson, when he wrote the second generation, decided to release that again with just the first part of the book as the original, and he added on a few pieces of information. He got a co-author a bit on it, but he's added some stuff that kind of helped lead into the second generation a little bit more. But that's it. V: The original miniseries and the novelization. V: The Second Generation. That's it. So then we are left with the main timelines. The main timeline is the NBC television timeline. That's all the NBC TV series, except both miniseries and weekly series. And then we try to fit in different pieces of the comics and books. The books were easier to fit into the timeline because a lot of the novels ended up taking place in different parts of the world. So they didn't really interact with the main characters. So you could say that they fit where they fit, and nothing really contradicted each other. It was like Chicago, New York, London, Florida, and all these different takes on what happened while we focus on Los Angeles in the main timeline. The characters did have some of their own books, and that's where it became a little bit tricky because, like the comics books, there's a couple of things that really made it difficult to coincide. Part of the problem was after the second miniseries was over and they were developing the weekly series, the comic books and the books were never given the or at least not given the storyline necessarily. I don't think they were known the storyline. They had to guess at what was going to happen a little bit. They had to guess even on which characters were going to make the jump because the whole sprawling cast of the miniseries wasn't going to make the jump. And that actually leads me to um, will lead me to the character I was going to talk about today, my character profile today. But first, I will say the only other bits and pieces are there's the main timeline, like I said, the novel timeline, which is basically a lot of the same bits and pieces of the main timeline, just with some little slight differences. And the comics timeline, it's almost its own timeline, um, but I try to work it in with what I could from the main television timeline. The only other bits and pieces to that, I split these off and had two extra timelines, was that there's an unfilmed 20th episode, which changes a lot of different things. And then there was an attempted reboot by J. Michael Straczynski, which I'm also going to get into later, that totally would have at least sequelized up until that point, but it might have taken some of the comic books away, some of the books away. We weren't quite sure as how I was going to go. But with that being said, I'll go into my character profile now. The character profile being a character by the name of Chris Faber. I'm going to get him on the screen for you. There we go. There's Chris. Chris Faber. He's actually a character that was not introduced until via the final battle. He was in the second episode of via the final battle. He comes in as the partner of a character called Ham Tyler, played famously by Michael Ironside. There's the two of them together. Became very popular characters in the show. But why am I talking about Chris now when I just talked about V the original? Should I wait till the final battle to start bringing guys in like this? Yes and no, because it actually helps with the timeline issue. One of the main problems between the timelines was Chris Faber, for two reasons. The aforementioned original novelization written by A.C. Crispin. There's a sequence in V the Final Battle in the first episode he was in where the Resistance has to attack a water plant, a water processing plant, to try to destroy it and bring the water back to the Earth, back to Earth, which you'll discover later on. It's a little bit of a spoiler. I guess I shouldn't say too much more about that. But in this raid, Chris and Ham help lead it, and it's successful. And they go back and they move on. For whatever reason in the novel, I don't know if it was an editorial error or if it was a script error, maybe something was going to happen that they changed. But she had Chris Faber get killed during that raid. Now, Chris isn't a main huge character, but as I'll say, he appeared in the final battle, both the last two episodes of the three-part series. He came back in three episodes of the weekly series, appeared in 5 novelizations and a bunch of the comics as well. For me, it's just 1 through 5, 7 and 8, and then 15 and 17 and 18. So he was in a lot of the issues afterwards. So if he's died in the original novelization, that kind of sparks a continuity error right there. But the second part of that is a similar thing. I believe he was on the cusp of being one of those characters that was he going to come back or was he not going to come back? Ham Tyler was a very popular character. Ham Tyler made the jump from the final battle to the weekly series, no doubt. Because Chris was his partner, I think a lot of the novels and comics assumed that he was going to be there. And again, in the comics, that happened supposedly right after the final battle. Chris is there with Ham the entire time. That's where the continuity error comes. And that's why I'm talking about him today. Who is Chris Faber? Well, we don't know much about him, to be honest. We never really find out much about him. He's a good old Southern boy played by Mickey Jones, who's you probably know him best maybe from Home Improvement or maybe National Lampoon's Vacation, I believe. But he comes in as the low-key muscle of Ham Tyler, who doesn't really need much muscle himself. But they're mercenaries. They join up with the Resistance. They've been taking Resistance all over the country. They're very hardcore. They're very emotionless. They're very much professional, which brings a bit of a different edge to the resistance, who's been so far made up of everyday common people, doctors, scientists, maybe some police officers, maybe just hell, there's some groundkeepers in there, news cameramen. These are people who know what they're doing in warfare. They've been all over the countries, South America, Middle America, Eastern Asia, um, Vietnam, and they do a lot of that. So they have the weapons expertise. They know what they're doing, uh, but they don't really mesh in well with everybody because they're going to do what needs to be done, even if people don't like it. So don't mesh in with the everyday people who aren't used to that talk. Chris and Ham get along famously, and they're got each other's backs. He's really a kind of fun guy. He's got some definite definite great motivations, and he's probably the softer of the two to a degree. Um, he really helps Ham Tyler through some stuff, especially his weekly series moments. As far as the weekly series went, they basically said that after the final battle, Chris had gone off across the country and helped out with a bunch of different resistance little groups before eventually making his way back, helping orphan children to the open city of Los Angeles. And that's where he meets up with Donovan and Ham again for a few more episodes before the series went to Kilter, and they had to take a lot of the cast. Just as he came back, he got fired again because a lot of the cast had to leave at that point in an effort to cut costs. But he's a great character, and that's where we will end him today. Leave that off, and that's actually how I'm going to end the show. I hope you guys enjoyed this show. Um, Next time we'll get into part two, and I'm going to do another character profile. This is probably going to be a longer episode because I had the timelines brought in as well. Some other fun things. If anybody wants to ask anything in the comments, leave suggestions about what they'd like to hear about the story, maybe my personal anecdotes or anything else that I might know, I'll be glad to tell you. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I'm trying to get up to 100 subscribers right now, so let's see what we can do. And please watch my other shows, PLD 1138. They just come out generally on Saturday, sometimes Sunday, sometimes to the weekend though. And I got some other shows that I'm going to be developing too, as far as movies go, possibly an interview show, and things of that nature. But I hope you enjoy yourself. Thank you very much for checking this out. And as always, Pretenama, which is the visitor word for peace. And we'll get to that eventually. So Pretenama. Goodbye now.